Welcome, friends, to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock flavoured podcast. On this show, Andy Darby puts his pen down to come back and follow up our Winds of Limbo discussion with another of Moorcock's 60s SF outings, The Shores of Death, aka The Twilight Man. As we've already covered the Black Corridor, the Winds of Limbo and the Rituals of Infinity, and we've just about knocked off the history of the Runestaff and the Swords of Corum, with just one more episode each on those two to come, we're bashing our way through Mike's 60s output. Just a handful more to go, notwithstanding a ton of Elric stories, of course, which we'll treat separately because of their narrative timeline, but we'll truly have covered a classic part of his oeuvre by the time we've just got a few more out. So Behold the Man and the Sundered Worlds will come in for you soon. Oh, and the Ice Schooner, too, and probably a couple of other things I've forgotten about. But back to The Shores of Death. First published as a novel under the title The Twilight Man in 1966, having originated from a two-part series printed in New Worlds magazine under the Shores of Death title. In his introduction to the 1966 Compact SF edition, Moorcock wrote, "This novel started life as a somewhat loosely knit and hastily written short serial in New Worlds when I had just started editing the magazine, and long material was hard to come by. It was a romantic, extravagant piece of work, and although it got a better reception than it deserved, many readers asked, where's the last instalment? Because the ending hadn't made the point clear it was meant to make. Others hinted, or stated blindly, that the science wasn't all it could be, particularly the idea of clashing galaxies exceeding the speed of light and converting to energy. They were right. I wasn't convinced by the science either. Thus, I have rewritten the novel entirely with only a fraction of the original plot and material, using a deliberately formal style, and making quite sure, I hope, that my theme is coherent this time." I won't read it all, but he also adds, "As I see it, there is an observable pattern to human existence, a basic ethic, all but immutable, which obeys fixed laws. It takes the form of a never-ending ritual, a great game played by the races of mankind over thousands of years, which ensures, above all, the survival of Homo sapiens as an entity. The rise and fall of nations and governments, the fate of individuals, are all essentially controlled by this survival ritual, no matter what form it takes at any particular time. There is a certain freedom of action within the rules of the game, and men and nations always have the choice between enlightenment and ignorance, good or evil, freedom or slavery, to a large extent. It is my belief, based not on a religious view, but, I hope, a rational one, that good must therefore always triumph over evil, even if the righteous have a hard time of it in the short term. That cancers in the form of, say, Nazism, cells gone wild, are always in the long run destroyed by this blind survival instinct. No single man ever saves a situation. The heroes we have are merely the men who help a situation right itself. Fear has many causes and takes many forms. I wrote this book to try and isolate a few, and also to entertain you with a spot of melodrama. I hope you find the mixture to your taste, and that you will forgive the self-indulgence I have shown in writing this introduction in the first place. Michael Moorcock, April 1966. That was evidently a theme at the forefront of his mind in the mid-60s, as this, the Black Corridor and the Winds of Limbo, all emerged within the space of a year or two, and all have very, very common themes and parallels. So, make sure your grav belt is switched on, step away from the party for a while, mind the dead bloke on your way, and join Andy and me as we visit the Shores of Death. Well, welcome back, Andy Darby, to Derry and Tom's. Nice to have you back.
Hello, mate. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's been a while, and I think last time we did Blade in the Angel's Shadow last time around, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
Yeah, and before that we did the Winds of Limbo.
Yes.
And this time we're here to do the Shores of Death, which I don't think is that far removed from the Winds of Limbo in some ways, but we'll get to that in a second, because first of all, some business. I think this is very much a book of two halves, so I've curated my beers accordingly. and for the first half, oh my God, what have I done? What have I done on my can? For the first half, I'm kicking off with a Sweet Shop Sours from Vault City Fizzy Watermelon Slices. It's quite tart, but it's all right. If you like sour beers, it's not too bad. And as my backup,
interesting one.
Yeah, and as my backup, I've got a North Brewing 8 times round the sun, 4.5% quadruple triple ghost. Yeah.
It sounds That sounds, I don't know what that sounds, but it sounds.
Yeah, it sounds vaguely wrong, really, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm drinking some Kraken black spiced rum.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
I don't mind a bit of Kraken. Quite a few years ago, that was like the shit hot, off the press spiced rum, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Is the one you're drinking like the more coffee-ish one?
No, I think mine's actually probably from a few years ago because I bought a couple of bottles and this is the remainder of it. So
it's done well to last that long.
Oh, it has, yeah.
Right. So, as we know, you are a very prolific writer. You've been releasing chapters of The Crow Feeder on your Substack, about 11 chapters so far, I think?
Yeah, I think that's right, yeah.
So tell us all about The Crow Feeder.
Crow Feeder started as me trying to write a bit of flash fiction in under, I think it was 800 words. Then I thought, I actually like the way this is going. I'd like to actually progress this a bit further. And so I started treating it in the same way as I did with the original Me and the Monkey stuff, in that I wouldn't plot it at all. I'd go in completely free-thinking each episode, write up about 1,000 words, and then just publish whatever was there. So I was doing sort of like one a week.
Yeah.
And so it's coming out like that, and it's. I quite like the way it's going. It's sort of a bit sort of like this warrior character who's a bit like Culcullen, the Irish hero, who goes into these berserk frenzies and like Slane goes into the warp spasm type thing. But this dude's, I'm not going to say possessed. He's more or less inhabited by this god. And this god is from sort of like some evil bastard who lives in this odd place, and he just hates life, and he just wants sacrifice all the time. So he's inhabited the Crow Feeder, and the Crow Feeder is now his vessel for murdering everyone who comes into contact with him when he's angry, basically.
Nice. So when you were doing it an episode at a time like this, does it end up feeling like episodic, or are you writing it to an overall arc and plan?
Sort of know where it's going at the end, but everything that happens as I write it is new to me.
How exciting.
I quite like writing like that. I mean, I wouldn't want to write everything like that, but sometimes it's just really freeing to sit there and go, okay, what's going to happen now? And then just go, oh, yeah, great, let's do that, and go that direction.
Will there be a compiled or even a printed version at some point?
I think eventually, as long as it goes the way I hope it's going to go, I'd like to put it in an anthology of short stories, because I've got a few other bits and pieces that I've been working on, because I'm still writing the follow-up to The Blade in the Angel's Shadow, which has taken a bit of a backseat at the moment because I've been doing my day job so much that I haven't really got my head fully into the writing of that. So I'm about 10 chapters in, but I've stalled a bit. So all this other stuff keeps popping up, and I keep distracting myself by writing these short bits. But all writing's good writing, so it doesn't really bother me that much.
Yeah. Have you got any other projects on the go?
Another sort of like probably a novella, which is it's sort of the Return of the Magnificent Seven set in medieval Spain with vampires. which sort of is a bit interesting. And I'm also starting to think about doing the third and final installment of the Monkey Chronicles as well.
Ah, cool.
So there's all that sort of like going on in my head, and it's just a matter of crushing it all together and actually getting something out.
Yeah, lovely. So why did we decide on the Shores of Death? I can't remember. Did we just go, let's do the Shores of Death?
Yeah, I think it sort of like went that direction, because we were talking about doing some Mick Farron stuff, and then that got sidelined, and then... We were going to
do... I've still got it next to my bed.
Yeah,
Texture Festival.
Yeah. So we then had a brief conversation about something else, and you said, if you want to do another Moorcock science fiction one. So I said, well, why not Shores of Death? And you went, nobody's selected that, so let's have a go at that. So
all right, cool. Well, that sounds good.
It was that considered.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Sometimes that's just the way we roll.
Yeah.
And I think we have been gradually bashing our way through these, because Shores of Death is another one of Mike's mid-60s-ish, at the time, standalone sci-fi ventures.
Yeah.
Although eventually it was collected in the Golanx editions in the volume Moorcock's Multiverse with the Sundered Worlds, a.k.a. the Blood Red Game, and the Winds of Limbo, a.k.a. the Fire Clown, which, of course, we covered a year or two ago. But it's not to be confused with the 12-part comic series and collection, also titled Moorcock's Multiverse, just to keep things fucking stupid. There were other couple of others in that spell too. Like there's one called The Distant Sons, which was originally a serial public. I think it was that his James Colvin or his Philip James or one of those pseudonyms, which we'll get to one day. And The Rituals of Infinity, aka The Wrecks of Time. Why they all had 2 titles, I don't know, which were discussed very lightly back in 2020 with Keck W. And that, along with the 3 we just talked about, was collected in The Road Between Worlds, the White Wolf collection. It's never fucking easy with Moorcock to keep on top of all this, is it? And I think those versions were revised as well. And I've got a little quote from Mikey out the time saying, I have, with John Davis' help, made the few revisions necessary for inclusion here, but otherwise had the sense not to begin tinkering with them. Whatever vitality they possess has not been refined to extinction. Oh, okay, fair enough. I actually did have a look at the Moorcock's Multiverse one, and Clovis Barker was not renamed Clovis von Beck.
Oh, joy.
So that's something. There was a little bit of von Beckization we found with the Winds of Limbo, wasn't there?
Yes, definitely, yeah. It all started to slant in that particular family tree, didn't it?
Yeah, it really did. It really did. Although I think I have pretty sure I've seen that some of them have since been republished and de-von Becked. Maybe I dreamt that. I can't remember. It's so confusing. Okay. Yeah. But this one, anyway, definitely another one that features striking imagery and ideas. I'm honestly surprised I can't immediately summon to mind a Rodney Matthews painting called The Shores of Death or something, because it's got some quite vivid ideas and imagery, that twilight zone between the day and night sides of an earth that stops rotating. Yes. Pretty cool. Yeah. Very, very metal, potentially.
Yes. Yeah. And all these sort of like flying craft and all that sort of stuff, the way they're all summoned and zooming about all over the place. That whole bit. I mean, I'm jumping ahead here, but that whole bit with the moon crashed into the earth. That whole bit is just so fucking heavy metal cover. It's just screaming for a mad mutant guitarist stood on top of it, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, even this one had an alternate title in the 60s that was slightly less metal. Shores of Death, pretty cool metal name. Twilight Man, not so metal. No. That's what it was originally published as. Don't carry the same level.
American TV series called Twilight Man or something like that.
Oh God, I don't know. There could have been. Now, speaking of metal, there was a conversation going on Blue Sky yesterday regarding Judas Priest, and you mentioned seeing Priest on their Sad Wings tour in 1976.
Yes.
Unbelievable. You saw Judas Priest with Rob Halford in full-on early Elric mode. Yeah. In probably a silk embroidered dressing gown with long blonde hair, and KK Downing in a Stetson and huge flares and a waistcoat, or whatever they were wearing at the time, which I'm pretty jealous about, I've got to say.
Yeah, I was like 15, 16. We used to go to a place called the Railway Tavern in Birmingham, and Priest had a residency there.
Right.
And this is before they broke big time. And we used to go, regularly and go and shout and stuff like that, and it was quite obvious that they were going places.
Yeah.
And then when they did the Sad Wings tour, and Birmingham Town Hall there was just amazing. And Rob Halford was dressed. I'm going to say Freddie Mercury. He had the whole thing going on, the split-fronted catsuit and all this sort of stuff, and a cloak. And it was just mad. It was a great gig, a really good gig.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was Harry Sard or Joe Banks made the comment that the arc that they went through from Rock a Roller through Sad Wings of Destiny to Sin After Sin, not only in terms of musical progression, but visibly over the course of those 2 years, was quite a remarkable transformation.
Yeah. Well, I think Mr. Halford, once he'd found himself and was quite open about who he was, just went, fuck it. And just went leather studs, motorbikes, everything. And then you've got, the whole band took on this proper... Because I wouldn't class them as new wave of British heavy metal like a lot of the bands at that point.
No, they were too early, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. But they were sort of seminal. They led the way for all this lot, who then came up behind them. I mean, you got bands like Diamond Head and all that sort of stuff who appeared on the scene, who also were from Birmingham and the Midlands and stuff. And they were definitely influenced so much by Priest, and that sort of like that Priest Sabbath crossover sort of thing that put proper balls into the music of that period when they came out. It was really good.
Oh yeah, but I mean, by the time Stained Class, but especially Killing Machine, comes out in 1979, the entire template for the look of the new wave of British heavy metal is set by Judas Priest. isn't
Yeah.
it? You know,
Absolutely.
4 or 5 row studded belts and wristbands, spandex, leather jackets, tight vests, skinny jeans, all that stuff. It's all there. I mean, I think, Maiden probably tripped up a little bit when they had the jeans with the roll-ups and the stripy Russian Marine T-shirts on the back of Number of the Beast. But apart from that one hiccup, the entire new wave of British heavy metal was following suit after Judas Priest. I mean, it's crazy, really. So that was 1976, which seems a long way back now, but this book predates that by another 10 years, because this book's from 66.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Mike's only about 5 or so years into his published career in terms of novels. He's only about 26 himself when this comes out. So he's still very much in that early hyper-production phase where all his ideas are coalescing. Some of his inspirations are close to the surface. He's already been editor of New Worlds for almost 2 years by this point, so he's super, super productive. And you've got that touch of dying earth genre going on in here as well. Bit of a blend, I think, with what was going on in the Black Corridor and the Winds of Limbo, but with him very overtly political mode for the first half.
Yes.
Challenging some norms and niceties right off the bat with a central character that is the result of incest.
Yeah, and sort of like no qualms about it either. There's, there's no apologies. It's straight in there.
Yeah, I mean, it'll definitely refine some of those ideas further down the line with more of a definitive authorial voice, I think, and style with things like Dances at the End of Time. Or that sequence of 3 books in which his central character isn't necessarily the product of incest, he just engages within a couple of pages of the first book. When he has sex with his mother, the Iron Orchid. And of course, we can't forget Jerry's relationship with Catherine in the Jerry Cornelius novels while we're at it too. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but this theme and sexual transgression, of course, more broadly, evidently one of Mike's chosen focuses back then. I think it was definitely appearing with some frequency in those first few years. But that said, as I just mentioned, he was 2 years or so into his first run on New Worlds at this point. And taboo breaking was one of the hallmarks of the new wave, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of sort of J.G. Ballard in this book. And I mean, Ballard obviously wrote some stuff which was very pushing the limits. Yeah. And I think this really has that sort of feel to it. He's moving into an area where he's going to talk, like you say, about politics. He's going to talk about the ideals of society breaking down and how utopia probably isn't utopia, and how people will do anything to survive, even if it's have sex with your own kith and kin. It's an interesting sort of like take, especially for that point in the mid 60s when we were still looking at sort of like books like Stranger in a Strange Land and all this sort of stuff, which have got their own sort of free thinking hippie-ish ideals going on where everyone's having sex with each other and stuff, but there's still these taboos of not shagging your own kith and kin. And there's a lot of stuff in there which is almost a little bit lightweight compared with how this all of a sudden steps up. And I think, Ballard, obviously, because I believe Mike was involved with Ballard in New Worlds, wasn't he? And so, they probably worked closely together and they saw each other's work. And this is going to obviously influence your writing, isn't it? Which should do.
Yeah, absolutely. They were all like Langdon Jones, Hilary Bailey, is it Barrington Bailey? To what degree, I wonder, was there a joint commitment to it, or perhaps even a subconscious or even conscious engagement in one-upmanship when it came to these things, as well as, the rejection of the creative shackles? But it does pose an interesting question, which he does all the time in his science fiction, because he's not about, the tech fetishism or the traditional futurism. What he is about is what happens when you've had a utopian society in place for 400 years, where money has been abolished and it's super permissive. Children are brought up in a society by their incestuous fathers. And I suppose what we've got to remember is Mike is right in the middle of his 3-day, 45,000 word book writing habit at this point. These first couple of pages, which we'll look at in a second, he's probably rattling them off faster than we've just done the introduction of this podcast.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He's doing his 200 words a minute We've been going for 18 minutes. He's probably written the first 2 chapters by now.
I would be surprised.
Yeah, well, let's see him picking away at this. But anyway, what edition are you reading from?
I have got the Mayflower with the lovely demon on the front. This is definitely my favourite cover of this. You can see how old this one is. It's all faded on the spine where it's been sitting on a bookcase since I bought this back in the 70s. So
that is a wonderful Bob Haberfield cover, isn't it? Which I think if you really, really stretch the imagination, you could say perhaps that's a representation of Orlando Chavez. Maybe.
Maybe.
With a real, after several whiskies and half a dozen Quaaludes, maybe that is Orlando Chavez. I, on the other hand, have got this quite interesting copy, which is with Clovis Marker on the cover looking like he's about to gape after a night on the town.
Yeah.
And this was published by Rock, R-O-C. And I was looking at this, and I've had this on the shelf for donkey's years, and I was looking at it thinking, I don't think I've got another book published by Rock, but Rock was an imprint of Penguin, or a subdivision, whatever the expression is. And the only other Rock books listed in this paperback are 5 Battletech books. So Battletech was a war game done by FASA. And they did loads of novels. There was loads of Shadowrun novels. Game by the same company, and they were all published by this anyway. But I looked it up, and there's probably a good reason why I ain't got any other Rock paperbacks on my shelf. It's because Penguin launched it as a sci-fi and fantasy line. ROC Rock being the mythical bird and fitting in with the other bird-themed lines like Puffin and everything else. But because this was a fantasy line, Fantasy Bird. But it got subsumed into the Ace line after Penguin merged with another publisher a few years down the line. So there you go. Factoid.
Thank you. That's good.
The blurb on the cover: on a stilled earth, the last generation of humanity waited for death in the sunshine. Fair enough. Not a bad tag. Not a bad tagline. And on the back, it says, it's contradictory because it says child of the twilight. Okay, fine. Then it says born on the dark side of an earth that had stopped rotating on its axis, Clovis Marker rose to supreme power in the utopia of perpetual daylight. Well, the first bit was right, at least, but he wasn't born on the dark side of the earth, and he doesn't really rise to supreme power in the utopia either, although he is fairly well, admired, but we'll get to that. And I won't read the rest because there's spoilers. But this copy has the 1966 intro that Mike wrote for the original Twilight Man release, so I'll assume it's the unrevised manuscript, but I'm not going to do any side-by-side checking. But it's dedicated to Harry Harrison. It says, and there's a quote from Franklin D. Roosevelt saying, "Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself." And there's an introduction, which I think is quite, if you're picking this up in Woolies in 1966, it's quite a startling introduction. It says, not the introduction, prologue. I won't read the introduction because it's really long, but the prologue. When she told her father she was pregnant, he said, "We'll have to get rid of it." But almost immediately his morbid, introverted mind was fascinated by the idea of permitting the birth, so he put his arm around his daughter's soft shoulders and murmured, "It is wrong, however, to take life, particularly when life is so scarce in this region of the world. Let us see if the child lives after birth. Let nature decide." They lived in a grotesque tower in the Twilight region, moulded several centuries before from steel and fiberglass by a neo-natural architect. Its asymmetrical lines gave it the appearance of something that had grown, living, from the ground and then atrophied. Red dust blew around it and sparse brown lichen covered its lower parts. The tower threw a black shadow across the rock, and the shadow never shifted, for the earth had not turned on its axis since the raid from space ages before, when the space-dwelling creatures had paused with casual ease to stop the world spinning, looted what they required, and passed on in their insane, ceaseless passage through the universe. One of the bird-like mammalian bipeds had been left behind, and from him it was learned that his race was seeking the edge of the universe. When they discovered it, they would fling their ships and themselves into the oblivion of absolute lifelessness. From what could be understood of the alien's explanation, his people were driven by a racial guilt which had existed for eons. This was all mankind could learn before the alien had killed himself. Wow! I mean, if you're reading that in Woolies, thinking, what shall I spend my pocket money on? That's pretty incredible hook, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was... For me, that was what dragged me in. I mean, that first couple of paragraphs and that idea of the grotesque towers in the Twilight region. Yeah, it's like a post-apocalyptic Melniboné.
Yeah,
isn't it? You've got these sort of like strange the Dreaming Towers, but they're all corrupt and black, and this like almost like some sort of fungus is growing around the middle part of the world where it's stopped turning. Yeah, it's brilliant.
And you've got that nice touch of cosmic horror as well, with an insane group of aliens that are seeking the edge of the universe so they can throw themselves into it.
Yeah.
Just casually, in passing, stopping the rotation of the Earth, stealing a load of shit and moving on.
Yeah.
It was, you know, I always know that Moorcock is influencing a bazillion other things. You know, if they weren't bird-like, that's basically the entire deal of the necromongers in the Chronicles of Riddick.
Yeah.
To find the edge of the universe where everything is all just death and throw themselves in it. And along the way, they're just going to fuck up every world they come across like locusts.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we move on to page 12. And I'll just read a bit of this as well. I'm going to get you involved in some of this reading, Andy, as we go along. But it says, now the Earth, with perpetual day on one side, perpetual night on the other, and a twilight and dawn region between the two, circled on around the sun. Psychological alterations had been bound to result from the drastic environmental changes that had occurred in the different regions of the planet. The alterations had been beneficial to some and not to others. In the sparsely populated Twilight region, where Walter Marker and his daughter lived in love, the inhabitants had turned in on themselves, rarely leaving their heavily guarded towers, devoting their time to eccentric pursuits, pleasures, and experiment of a dark, narcissistic nature. Children were scarcely ever born in the Twilight region, so inbred were the inhabitants. It was customary, in the event of conception, to destroy the fetus. Walter Marker's decision to let his incestuous offspring live was the decision of a man whose mental and emotional appetites had become dulled. Having convinced his daughter that she must endure a pregnancy, he waited in morbid anticipation for the birth. In the season of the winds, in the post-raid year 345, a son was born to Walter Marker and his pale daughter Batilde. It was a lonely, unlucky birth, and Batilde died of it after a few months. Strangely, for a child of incest, Clovis Marker hung to his life and grew strong and healthy in time. He flourished in spite of his father's careless and disappointed attitude towards him. His father, expecting a freak of some kind, half hoping that his offspring should be a girl so that he could continue to experiment, lost interest in Clovis as the boy grew healthier and healthier. Clovis was as delicate-boned as slender as Batilde and Walter, but there was a toughness about him and a will to survive that was intensified, perhaps by the unconscious understanding of the circumstances by which he had entered the world. It was this will to live, apparent since birth, that was his most remarkable characteristic. Well, that's some really, really dark shit, isn't it? Maybe even the darkest opening to any Moorcock book, I think, and a bit troubling. And particularly the bit about Marker Senior and his daughter living, in inverted commas, in love.
Yes.
And him hoping for a girl.
Yeah.
Like, fucking hell.
I know. To continue his experiments.
Yeah. It's direct, but the suffering of Clovis, Marker's mother, is horrific and a weird combination of explicit and implied. But the extent to which the slider moves left or right is entirely down to the reader and the worldview. But even someone with the hardest fucking worldview, although, knowing what we know about some parts of the world and their attitudes to women and various other things, there are people who are various points on that spectrum. But, I mean, fucking hell, this is a book of ideas, but for me, this is easily the most disturbing page in the book, by a mile. I've got no idea how deliberate or throwaway that was on Mike's part, because, again, he's probably bashed. By now, we've been going 28 minutes, he's probably bashed out part one. You know? But, oh, God, what a fucking crazy setup. Just crazy setup.
It does sort of like, he's really putting a stamp on this to actually tell you who Clovis is and where he comes from and why he's like he is. And I think he sets it up in 2 pages effectively, doesn't he? And you get this idea that this bloke has come from all of this. So everything he does post that is the result of what he's grown up with.
Yeah, I think when we get to the end, we'll have a quick conversation, I think, or pass comment on whether it's the psychology of Clovis Marker that makes him make the decisions he makes in the end, or whether he's just a fucking Burke.
Yeah.
But, you know, we'll get there, because he has enough warnings.
Yeah.
But, we're getting ahead of ourselves. But yeah, Mike keeps the ideas coming in these pages just absolutely relentlessly. So lifespan is extended to, in some cases, 300 years. But suddenly the ability to procreate and birth children ceases without explanation. In the search for answers, they send robotic expeditions into the Nightlands, but discover nothing, because they refer to the dark side of the Earth as the Nightland. The colonies on Mars and the Moon and Ganymede offer no answers and are barely populated anywhere due to another phenomenon, which is introduced in the book, that makes space travel extremely difficult, as people experience massive psychological problems if they're away from Earth for protracted periods. A couple of months, you start to get uneasy. And as we see later on in the book, when we actually are exposed to the results of what they call the space ache, it can be pretty horrific. It's horror film territory. And we know that there was an expedition to the fabled colony on Titan around 400 years ago, where myth has it that the colonists there overcame the space ache, in inverted commas, but it seems to be lost without trace. So all of a sudden, the Earth is coming to acceptance that it's going to face an eventual but very slow extinction because nobody can give birth to children anymore. This is just the prologue.
Yeah.
This is all just the prologue. So put my glasses back on. Fuck me. I need to get some bifocals. As when the realization dawned that the mortality of the race could not be averted, a new mood swept through the society of Daylight Earth. The people gave themselves up to pleasure-seeking, and a party began. Moorcock likes his massive parties, doesn't he?
He does.
Especially sexy time parties. It was a kind of wake, a premature wake held by the soon-to-be deceased. Too sophisticated to let it control them as yet, the people of Daylight suppressed their hysteria or gave vent to it harmlessly in their arts and pleasures. Clovis Marker resigned his chairmanship of the council and mysteriously disappeared. The shock of realising he was never to propagate himself had reawakened the dormant elements in Marker's psyche. He became wholly driven by what had caused him to survive, his birth and early childhood so successfully. He became wholly driven by his intense will to live. The long party continued, and the signs of the suppressed hysteria began to show in the fashions, art, and in the topics of conversation. From time to time, people wondered where Clovis Marker had gone and why he had gone, though it had not taken them long to get used to instances of irrational actions by men once thought completely adjusted. It had been surprising, though, that Clovis Marker, their demigod, should break so soon, unless he was seeking still for a remedy for their plight. They told themselves that this must be so. It was comforting to know that Marker was making a sacrifice, even though it was absolutely certain that no hope was left. Clovis Marker was gone a year, and then he returned to his friends and his people. They celebrated his homecoming with a party. It was really just part of the ever-present party. It was more elaborate than usual. That was all. What a prologue. Not only do we have the setup of the psychological complexity of Marker and the ideas around the post-alien intervention Earth, the space ache, mysteries around the colonies, the Nightlands, lost expeditions, which is dripping with a taste of cosmic horror. We've even got a tiny little Children of Men scenario. Well, we've got the whole Children of Men scenario. But there's another bit at the top of page 16. It says, 200 years was the life expectancy of the youngest person on Earth. Her name was Faustina Carmen. So you've got this idea that the youngest person on Earth is also has some degree of celebrity. And P.D. James wrote Children of Men in 1992, and there's zero evidence that there's any connection between the two in terms of inspiration, and there probably isn't. But there's that line instantly catapulted my mind into a scene from the film of Children of Men. There's a scene very early on where people are in a shop watching a TV news report about the youngest person on the planet. Because, of course, nobody can birth anybody. The last person born. The newscaster is saying, the world was stunned today by the death of Diego Ricardo, the youngest person on the planet. Baby Diego was killed in a bar fight in Buenos Aires after refusing to sign an autograph. He was born in 2005, the son of Marcelo and Sandra Ricardo, a working-class couple from Buenos Aires. It's a really, really powerful idea that Mike is just one of a bazillion ideas. He's bashing off his typewriter in a frenzy because he needs 150 quid to help pay for the bills. Not just his family and the kids' Weetabix, but for the New World's office to make sure they're getting paid. And he's like 26. He's like 26 or something. It's incredible, really. But it's right up there with all the other ones he was knocking out. But I mean, I think there's probably some evidence this is more of a transitional novel, but we'll get to some of that. So you've got this additional concept now of Earth slipping into a long degenerate party mood as a result of the existential despair. Another idea he'll reuse and expand upon in not only the Cornelius novels with the weeks-long parties at Ladbroke Grove, at Sporting Club Square, but the frozen dying world in Phoenix and Obsidian, where they're all just engaged in sex and debauchery. So it's a very specific take, Mike's very specific take on a dying Earth novel. And we hadn't even got to chapter 1.
No.
Oh, we've been going 34 minutes. We better up the pace, haven't we? Right, let me get a gob full of this watermelon sour. So Clovis Marker is at a party, which is just a giant, psychedelic, faintly hysterical fuck party. He's troubled because he's been stalked by a mysterious figure he knows as Mr. Take. He knows this name from ship's passenger manifests after spotting this stranger on Ganymede and Mars and the other places he's been in the past year, since the Earth's final realisation of his fate. We also meet his old friend and protector, 290-year-old Narvis Volusi. He's the guy who 12-year-old Clovis Marker found him when he stumbled out of the wilderness of the Twilight Lands, and he lived with him and his wife in, I think it was Kathmandu, wasn't it?
Yes.
Where he stumbles to Kathmandu. There's some interesting text where, since Clovis has come back, he now feels a degree of disgust at the age of Narvis Volusi, even though they've been friends for 20 years and essentially he saved his life. But this stranger has vanished. They go to a smaller gathering of old compadres and counsellors who aren't currently fucking, although Marker does make observations how most of them are letting themselves go a bit this past year. There are a few characters, we won't go into detail about all of them, but there's an undercurrent of hysteria kind of underpinning everything. And there's this season pilot, Brand Kalax, who will come in to be a fairly important character. And there's his friend Andros, who is also an interesting character with a very particular arc over the course of this book.
Yes.
Basically, dying Earth Hitler. In the making.
Yeah. Is proper stormtrooper material, isn't he?
Yeah. And it all seems to kick off because he doesn't get the shag.
That's right. It's all jealousy, isn't it, really, at the end of the day? So he turns it into some sort of like mad, if I can't have it, then the world's fucked, basically.
Yeah, that's right. Who'd think you'd ever see anything like that? Yeah. Spurned men turning into arseholes.
Oh, awful.
Yeah. But we have this season pilot, Brand Kalax, who's itching to lead another expedition to Titan to find the descendants of the original colonists from 400 years ago. And Marker is then further puzzled when the partygoers move on and leave one of their number behind, and he checks him out, he's dead. So this guy has just died, his heart gave out from all the partying and fucking and whatever else, so they just left him there and move on to the next party experience or the next place. And this is the new normal, and this is what Clovis has come back to.
Yeah, it's this idea that they can't face their own mortality, isn't it? So they just up sticks and shift to somebody else's house when somebody dies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We found in chapter 2, we found the world's youngest person, who we've already referred to, Faustina Carmen, 28 years old, tall, gorgeous. She is determined to meet and propose marriage to Clovis Marker because she's the youngest Daysider and he's the youngest Twilighter, so there's a nice symmetry to it. And her husband was lost on an expedition to space, possibly the one to Titan. I don't think it doesn't really define it at that point, but he's lost in space anyway. His expedition went missing in space, so she's a widow. And fortunately for her agenda, one of Marker's mucker, this Andros guy, has the hots for her and takes her along to the debate around Brand Kalax's Titan plan, which is all amusingly downbeat, as Kalax addresses the audience and states his plan. Volusi stands up, responds that there's a reluctance to grant the resources, but as everyone's losing the rationality, he might as well be just allowed to do it. Marker just goes, yeah, I've got nothing to add, really.
Yeah.
So there's this great little passage where Volusi concludes, there is little hope, it would be stupid to hope. If our destiny is to die, let us try to do it well. At which a woman at the back laughs hysterically, floats off with a zero grav belt, followed by another attendee, get into the air cars and just go off to rejoin the party. Such a great image, such a great scene, that even the people who are trying to run the council are just like, yeah, we're pretty doomed, aren't we? Just let him do it.
Yeah.
And then those people remain and vote yes, and he gets the resources to build this ship. Now, I've got an admission to make here. When I first read this, however many years ago, I didn't really get on with this book. I was expecting to read this and find it hard work, but there is so much texture to all of this very, very quickly. And it's, as well as being grim, there are also moments where it's bleakly funny. And that is one of them. And I think much like the Winds of Limbo and the Black Corridor, it resonates more reading it now.
Yeah, I've got a feeling I probably struggled a little bit with this when I first read it, but reading it a second time, you go, oh yeah,
Yeah. Whether that's my age or current affairs or both,
Probably a bit of both, Yeah,
a bit of both, I reckon. But anyway, Fastina makes a beeline for Marker and he takes Aaron Velusi back to his pad for lunch. And over aperitifs, there's an exchange that's a great example of Mike's philosophy in most, if not all, of these 60s novels, and one that he'll continue to develop and explore more in more colourful and abstract terms over the next 10 to 15 years. But let's have a read.
"When we're gone, at least this will remain," said Velusi, leaning on the invisible force rail. "When people bothered to debate these abstract issues, some used to think that the human race was a freak, a sport of nature, that we had no business being here at all, and no place in the scheme of things. Perhaps they're right."
Fastina smiled. "It doesn't matter now."
"Not to us," Velusi replied. "But there are people about even today who think that the space dwellers were some sort of mystic agency, like the old religions, whose purpose was to eliminate human beings, to straighten the biological record, as it were. It matters to them. It's becoming their creed."
"You mean those peculiar people who shave their heads and so on?" Marker asked.
"Yes, poor things. We don't change much, do we? Only a short time ago we had nothing to fear. Our population was small. We had everything we wanted. The world was good. We lived in a paradise, though we didn't know it."
"I knew it," Marker murmured.
"Yes, I suppose you did," Velusi continued. "I remember when you first came to live with us how you would go on and on telling us how perfect our society was compared with the one you just left. I could never properly understand why a certain kind of person actually chose to live in the twilight."
"Can you now?" Fastina asked.
"In a way, yes. Those people with their shaven heads are living in a kind of mental twilight already. If you have that mentality, then I suppose you choose to live where it can survive the best. That's what I was going to say. In a world without fear, the human virtues flourish and become dominant. We've had no violence, no major neuroses for centuries. The space dwellers somehow managed to put us in our place, made us realise our limitations, made us cultivate the best of what we had. But now fear is back, isn't it? Fear was largely responsible for creating the primitive religions, and fear of one sort or another was what fostered the unpleasant elements in even the sophisticated religions. Fear produced repressive societies, totalitarian governments, wars, and the major proportion of sexual perversions, as well, of course, as the multitude of mental perversions, perverse philosophical theories, political systems, religious creeds, even artistic expression. Think of the numbers of talented creative people who spent their lives trying to bend their gifts to express some insane notion of the way life should be. Well, it seems we're back where we started. There's nothing we can do about it. When in the past did a really irrational person ever listen to reason? I'm not a pessimistic man, but I get the feeling that we're going to enter a new dark age, which will only end when the last man or woman on earth dies. And at this rate, that could be sooner than we think."
"You sound like an ancient prophet yourself, Narvo." Marker drained the remainder of his drink. "The apocalypse is at hand, eh?" So that entire passage is very Moorcock of this period, isn't it? And in there, really, you've got the makings of Gran Bretagne. You've also got an exchange which is very reminiscent of Professor Hera and Jerry at the beginning of the final programme, where you've got the older, wiser guy and Jerry kind of nodding and considering all of his words and what it means for the end of the world and entropy. The language is slightly different, but thematically it's very similar. And a year later, he's writing the final programme and he's, like he always has done in many ways, he's recycling himself and he's repackaging some of this stuff, but really refining it as well. But all that stuff there about fear-produced repressive societies, totalitarian governments, wars, the major proportion of sexual perversion, mental perversions, perverse philosophical theories, political systems, religious creeds, even artistic expression. That's like Gran Bretagne in a nutshell, isn't it? You've got this like crazed totalitarian society that still engages in perversion, crazy art, because all the descriptions of Londra in the Room Staff series, they always describe it as full of twisted, artistic, architectural marvels. It's all there. It's all there. All the blueprint for what is to come is getting captured in a lot of these exchanges. Absolutely. Fortunately for Clovis, Velusi realises his cock-blocking Marker, so he makes himself scarce, but not before hinting enigmatically that he has his own project, and we'll find out what that is. And after revealing that he wasn't necessarily looking for a woman, Rather, he's looking for Orlando Jarvis, which is a new name, which we've not heard before. He takes Faustina to bed, only to get cock-blocked by the mysterious weird stranger Mr. Take, who's lurking in his bedroom, which is unfortunate. And he only hangs around to warn him off his plan, then escapes, leaving Marker and Faustina to muse over his odd reflexes, or his odd appearance and his startlingly fast reflexes. But then they still get down to it, but there's this really amusing part where, post-coitus, Marker exchanges in a huge exposition dump of pillow talk, which goes on for about 2 pages, which we'll summarise here, and we won't read out. But his dad told him about Orlando Jarvis, the scientist who led the original Titan colony expedition, an expert in biological and artificial adaptation that held the secret to solving the space ache problem. Meanwhile, Faustina is just like, head on his chest, just nodding, occasionally asking a question as he's banging on about all this stuff.
Yeah.
He was chief researcher for one of the sides in the last war, which is the last conflict between the commercial entities that used to rule the world.
Mm.
So probably X, Amazon, Apple, Meta, and all this lot that used to rule the world, the end game of which was rather wonderfully the nationalisation of everything and the abolition of money.
Mm.
Oh.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
That whole bit about the all of the commercial enterprises going to war reminds me of Rogue Trooper in 2000 AD, and it's got that the whole corporations beating the shit out of each other, and I love that whole story arc in Rogue Trooper is just brilliant.
Well, I wonder when things like corporate wars became a staple part of science fiction.
Mm.
Because the whole idea of future wars and corporate wars, and the future ruled by corporations wasn't new at this point. But the idea of a corporate war, which is the last war between, and he doesn't talk about corporations, he talks about commercial entities, which is wonderful because it could be Walmart. It could be any of these things.
McDonald's.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But you even had that in 2000 AD, didn't you? In the Cursed Earth, the Judge Dredd in the Cursed Earth. There were the burger wars between Burger King and McDonald's, which were partially responsible for the devastation of part of America.
Yes.
As part of the Cursed Earth. Yeah.
It's just brilliant stuff.
Yeah. Something else we found out about Orlando Jarvis, he experimented on living prisoners, so he was effectively a war criminal. And during his year out, Marker took a ship from Ganymede and visited Titan, only to find hideous, monstrous corpses and nobody living. So if we thought there was going to be any kind of expedition to Titan at some point to solve any of the problems in this novel, it's just like, no. In the post-sex exposition scene, it's always been nothing there.
Yeah, cross that off.
Yeah. But more info on Orlando. Marker's dad reckoned that he was immortal and, most importantly, had the power to make others immortal too. And I think that's where Clovis is like, light bulbs are going on in his head. And finally, for this massive exposition dump, an artist called Elodius, who also disappeared when Marker did, Marker thinks Elodius found him. And somehow, in some way, Mr. Take fits into all of this.
Reading that this time when I initially read that, it was like, is Mr. Take like this sort of like the little angel demon that sits on your shoulder and goes, don't do that. Oh, do this, go on, do that. Because he always pops up at these moments, doesn't he? And he's always like waving his finger, and it's like, fucking hell. Okay.
Yeah, he's basically he's keeping an eye on Clovis all the time to stop him doing what Clovis does.
Yeah.
And he fails to stop him.
Yeah, that fucking works out great, doesn't it?
Yeah. Why is so fixated on Clovis? I think we maybe get a slight hint of it towards the end because Orlando Jarvis seems to understand or have some kind of mental connection with people who seek him out. So he knows. And Mr. Take, at this point, I'm thinking, Mr. Take, it's Orlando Jarvis, isn't it?
Yeah.
But spoilers, everybody. I don't think anybody listens to this without expecting spoilers. But spoilers, it's not Jarvis. Anyway. We'll skim over chapters 4 and 5, but Andros calls, a ship is headed for a landing pad, he wants Marker present. Long story short, we get a proper picture of what the space ache can do because the ship returned on automatic. It's quite a distressing scene. The crew are dead, contorted in bestial shapes, as if extreme madness made them turn on themselves and each other. Crazy, writing, written in blood, smashed instrumentation. It's a horrific scene.
What's that? I can't remember the name of the movie, that sci-fi one where they all go mad in space and there's like, so it's all, everything's fucked up and warped. it's got like these. It's almost looks like Hellraiser in space.
Event Horizon.
Yeah, man, that's the one. When I read that's what crashed into my head was Event Horizon. Yeah,
of course, yeah, because Event Horizon is about how if you travel through hyperspace, hideous entities will get in your brain. And make you do horrific things. Yeah, so the interior of this ship is a little bit like that scene in Event Horizon where they finally get on board the Event Horizon.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, I never even thought of that, but yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. There are some people who reckon that Event Horizon could be, this is the fan theory, that Event Horizon could canonically be part of the Warhammer 40,000 universe.
Oh, really?
Because in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, the warp, i.e. hyperspace, is full of hideous demons and terrible things that without what they call a Holtzman shield, if that Holtzman shield falls, basically that's what happens. So, yeah, interesting. I mean, you know, these fan theories, these things developed independently, I'm sure. But yeah, this is another great example of something in 1966, which you will later see in computer games, horror films, and all sorts of different things. But we also find this ship was one of the lost expeditions, and one crew member was Fastina's husband. Thought lost with the expedition, now confirmed dead in the most horrific circumstances. But there's an odd moment of agreement between Marker and Andros here, where they decide to destroy the ship and not release the evidence to the public, and not let anybody know, and particularly not let the guy who is creating the new ship for the new Titan expedition, so nobody finds out. And I sort of expected this to play into things a little bit, but it doesn't. Really?
No. It was almost a big thing, and then it wasn't.
Yeah. And you get this a lot in Moorcock's 45,000 word 3 days books. He throws in a potential hook or foreshadows something that he doesn't end up writing on day 2 or 3, and that's one of those things, you know, like in the Hawkmoon books where Deverk in the Sword of the Dawn finds a bullet in the ruined city of Soriandum in Yell, and you think, oh, he's got a bullet. When's that going to come into play? Never. No. It will never come into play and never be mentioned again.
It'll come up in his last book. He'll tie all of the loose ends together. You watch.
Yeah, when he's 89 and he finally ties everything up. Yeah.
And then you'll have to do this sort of like Easter egg hunt through every other book you've ever read of his, just to find out what the fuck he's talking about.
Yeah. Fastina is processing the trauma, so Marker does a bit of investigation, and we get a little bit more detail about how bureaucracy is starting to break down. And at this point, he has a disturbing encounter with another example of societal breakdown in a young group of cult members burning a house down, who end up, we find out they are the Brotherhood of Guilt. And these people also have an alternative plan that they think that we should just nuke everything and destroy all vestiges and all artifacts of humanity and completely purge the world of everything. And
that was a bit like in what was it? That Planet of the Apes movie where they're all worshipping the atom bomb. Yeah,
beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, all things wise and wonderful. The Lord Bomb made them all.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I fucking love that movie. Yes, it's James Franciscus is no Charlton Heston, but great movie. Incredible final 15 minutes. Oh, amazing final 15 minutes.
Yeah.
The fight between Taylor and James Franciscus' character, I can't remember the name of his character. The fight in the cell is fucking brutal. And then the fight with the guerrillas in the church of the bomb. It's so violent.
Yeah, it's mad. It's a 70s movie. It's
absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Oh, wonderful. Now, chapter 6, I'm wondering if we should just read this, if you're game for it.
Of course.
So there's more Narvo Velusi. So let's just go for it, because this is more Moorcock being properly on his game with this stuff.
Okay. They call themselves the Brotherhood of Guilt, Narvo Velusi said, pouring Marker a drink. Originally, they simply decided to give up sexual relations because it was pointless, though it hadn't stopped anyone in the past. Well, you can guess what followed that decision, can't you? The masks and the rest were explained to them as being necessary so that a person's sex could not be distinguished. Up to now, they had been harmless in that they haven't actually done anything violent. This burning you mentioned must be the first. We'd have heard of others. I suspect that the house belongs to one of their number. It's an odd syndrome, Marker, but one we could have anticipated if we had not been so obsessed with the idea of our ultimate fate.
What do you mean? Marker noticed his hand was trembling as he took the drink and walked towards the window to look out over the forest of dark pines that lay below the hill on which Narvo Velusi had sited his house.
Well, while denying nature in themselves, they say that what is not natural is evil. You're quite right that it is the word you heard them use, and that therefore all human artifacts are evil.
Marcus shook his head. It doesn't make sense, Narvo. He took a sip of his drink. I know these peculiar ideas never do, but it's not that I really meant. I can't understand how a well-adjusted society could go so rotten in such a brief time. Even in the past, things didn't happen so rapidly. Narvo joined him at the window.
You're quite right, but in the past they had various means of resisting and controlling such outbreaks. They were a recurring cancer in the body of society, but usually they were promptly cauterized from the main body, segregated in some way. Sometimes they were not cut out in time, so you got the fanatical Christianity of what the Christian society later called their Middle Ages, and the equal fanatical black magic cults and secret societies. A few hundred years later, when non-religious leaders were dominating the world, you got the madness of Nazism. Still later, there were the meritocratic system which virtually controlled the whole world at one stage. And every time, of course, human society managed, through violence and struggle, to rectify itself and destroy the cancer. But now, Clovis, there will be no time to do any such thing.
Are you sure? Marcus' tone was bleak.
The only thing that would save us, Narvo smiled ironically, is salvation itself. If our poisoned cells could be revived, it is a pattern, you see. There's always a pattern.
Isn't there something positive we can do, Narvo? Isn't there some goal we could give people, even? He broke off and stared at his friend miserably.
Even if it means lying to them, perhaps there is. But you can see what's happening, can't you? A lie or two might halt the process for a little while, but it wouldn't stop it for long enough. And how would lying affect us, Clovis? There's no doubt in my mind that we should find ourselves corrupted, needing to gather more and more personal power in order to control the means of communication, keep the truth from the majority. It has started, you see. Even we are affected by what is happening. We can't fail to be.
Marker threw down his glass. It bounced across the sunlit room and struck a wall. Can't we divert them? Can't we appeal to their better instincts? All these people were sane, rational human beings up to a few months ago. Their ethical instincts have only been buried. If we can revive them...
An ethic is simply a system of survival. What does an ethic mean when there is no chance of survival?
Marker put his hands to his face, shaking his head mutely. Velusi went over and picked up his glass. It was unbroken. He filled it, then took it back to Marker.
Clovis, I mentioned the other day that I had a scheme as irrational as Brand Calix's, but one that might work to some extent.
What is it?
It's a stupid plan. It seems ludicrous even to me when I think about it. It is just something I thought of. I want to build a big transmitter, a bigger radio transmitter than any that has ever existed, and then I want to send a message on it.
A message? Why? What message? Marker tried to clear his head and just give his attention to the old man.
Just a message that will travel through space, that will go to other intelligent races in other star systems and galaxies. We know they exist. The space dwellers told us as much. It will be a message that will survive long after we have perished. It will be a kind of monument. It'll just say that we once lived. They probably won't even be able to understand the message.
What will it say? Velusi went over to a deep, high-backed chair and sat down.
Just, we are here.
Just that, but we won't be.
I know. But someone might follow the message back. The transmitter will continue to work after we are dead, you see. Another race might find it, discover our records, and we'll live on in a way, in their minds and their books. Do you see, Clovis?
I do, Narvo. But is there any point? I mean, could you convince the others that the transmitter would be worth building?
I'm going to try at the Great Glade tomorrow. The message could be picked up by all manner of creatures, you see. Perhaps some of them will be like us. The message will convey our pride in our existence, our gratitude to the biological accident that gave us our ability to reason. I know it's pathetic, Clovis, but it's the best thing I could think of.
It's better than anything I can think of, Marker said, putting his hand on the old man's shoulder. He saw that Narvo Velusi was crying. I'll come with you to the Glade tomorrow. I'll back you up. Work on the transmitter will employ thousands of people. It'll be therapeutic at the very least, eh? He made an effort and smiled at his friend.
It will be a kind of immortality, Velusi said, weeping openly now. Won't it, Clovis?
Yes, Marcus said in pity. A kind of immortality. Well, between this, the Black Corridor, the Windsor Limbo, Moorcock is properly on his game with all this stuff. Anybody who has sat in a pub with their friend about some of the news reports, or not some of the news reports, about some of the political movements, either here around things like Brexit, or in the States around the elections and the people coming into power. This idea, this Clovis says something along the lines of, how can people change so quickly? Well, you know what? It happens fucking quick, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it does, man. Yeah.
It happens really quick, and it doesn't matter how much of a sweet spot you think you're living in. You know, I sometimes think back to, like, you know, the 90s. I think it was more to do with the age I was, you know, about how things were so optimistic, and you wonder how things can travel so quickly backwards. But all I have to do, bless him, is go and sit with my dad for a couple of hours, and he'll put YouTube on, and I'll see his feed. Holy shit, man. Love my dad to bits, but fuck me. The idea that you can be absolutely stumped by people's thought processes, anybody's thought processes, let alone people you love and people close to you, or friends that you love, or any of those things, and get to a point where you just have to say, right, let's just not talk about these things.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it becomes just such a black hole of nonsense. It's sucking, and it like sucks your life out of you. I was talking to my daughter about this the other day, and I said to her that I'm getting more and more convinced that the Mayans had it right and the world ended in 2012. And we're now living in some sort of fucking limbo before we get sucked into the void. You know what I mean? And this is all the shit, the nonsense, the clown universe that's occurring in the meantime.
Yeah, we are living in the twilight sector.
Yeah. We've stepped into that, and that's it. Game fucking over.
I see stuff on the TV, and I see some of these fucking weirdos on the TV, like JD Vance.
Oh, man.
You know, and I think back to when David Icke was getting mocked on telly for saying people were space lizards in human skin.
Yeah.
And I look at people like JD Vance and I think, you know what, he might have had a point.
Yeah. It actually is V, and we're living in V.
yeah. It's fucking crazy. But yeah, I mean, there's all that. But really, the giant radio transmission plan, what do you make of that?
I mean, given the fact that, I think it must have been after this book was written, we got, Voyager? The NASA sent Voyager up there with the whole thing, with the record and the pictures of the people and this, and directions to planet Earth. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, we've actually done this, although we haven't made a massive Jodrell bank and beamed radio messages up there. We've actually sent a physical thing out into space to get people to come back and follow it back. And I guess it's right. I mean, it's what the Egyptian pharaohs did, wasn't it? I mean, you don't build a massive pyramid and go and live inside it with all your toys if you don't think you're going to live forever. There's some form of immortality. The writing was literally on the wall for them guys. It was like, this is my story. Whoever finds this in 10,000 years' time is going to know who I was, and these are the toys I had at the time. Aren't I fucking great? You know? Yeah.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because what do you do when it's all turned into shit around you? He's an old man, he's 290, he wants some evidence of what we left behind that's good after everything else has been burned down by the fucking nutters.
Yeah.
You can kind of identify with it, but there's a sense of frustration building in me as I'm reading this, that Clovis Marker, this hugely influential man who was once the chairman of the council of the daylight side of the earth, is being a little bit fucking ineffectual.
Yeah, you know what, I got that, and I was thinking, I want to slap you. Yeah. You've got the power to actually step in and do something, even if it's only go, let's go over there and have a party and ignore all them dickheads. Yeah. He doesn't do it. He just wanders around like some spoiled teenager, doesn't he? Oh, no.
What a surprise for a Moorcock protagonist.
Yeah. Although Jerry Cornelius, even though he had his moments of sort of like nihilism, he always had a sort of like a goal. He was always prepared to go somewhere and do something. Yeah. Whereas this dude is just like, no.
Yeah.
It was all rubbish, isn't it?
And he only gets worse because because now he and Faustina head off on a month-long shagging and nature holiday. Yeah. Well, the entire world is turned into shit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all very sweet, and it's a little bit tinged with melancholy when Faustina expresses regret that they can't have children when there are so many wonderful sights for children to potentially to see, because even though it's a dying earth in terms of humanity, it's still got beauty, it's still got whales, it's still got birds, it's still got all these things.
Her character is the one mitigating character in all of this. She gets carried along on a wave that she's got no control of.
Yeah.
Because he treats her appallingly later on. I mean, for fuck's sake.
Oh.
And it's like, fucking hell, but she's still there. She's still prepared to go out along with all this shit because she actually does love him and she thinks there is a future for them. And it's like, whoa, hang on.
He gets his comeuppance, though, doesn't he? He gets an ironic comeuppance. Yeah. But I mean, even in this fucking chapter where it's like they're living this idyllic existence for a month, laying on golden beaches, watching the whales and fucking. The last 2 paragraphs on page 60, it says, "It seemed, however, that they were bound together now, perhaps until death. How the link had been forged, he did not understand, but it had been forged, and neither would ever be able to stay away from the other for long. There might never be pleasure again, and only pain, but that would not matter, which is fine, right? But in the next paragraph, he could not explain his knowledge. Love, as he understood it, was not what they had, but love was there in all its forms. Hate was there too now, and anger, and a melancholy bitterness, and a need for a body that was not any sort of love or hate, but a blind hunger that terrified him. He could understand how such unbearable emotion could drive lovers to suicide." Like, fucking hell, Clovis Marker. I mean, we know that you're psychologically complex, but it does scan, and it's a common theme in Moorcock characters. I think that's probably just a little bit more extreme. I think the only more extreme misogyny that were found in a Moorcock character was the narrator in the My Experiences in the Third World War books.
Yeah.
I've not read The Brothel in Rosenstrasse for a long, long time, but I think that one has slightly grim elements as well.
Yes.
But has Mike ever crafted a character that just relates normally to women?
No. No. Off the top of my head, I can't think of one.
The closest we get, whether we could just describe them as relatively normal in terms of their affections for women, like maybe Hawkmoon. Okay, Hawkmoon is a PTSD-riddled mess, but his love for Yzelda, Count Brass's daughter, is relatively normal, and Corum's love for the Margravine Relina of Moidal's Mount. But the objects of their affection in those cases are so sketchily written and so shallow, it doesn't really carry any weight.
It is strange, because if Moorcock tends to write a complex female character, there's always some element of abuse in one way, shape or form. I mean, like Gloriana, I mean, the whole book is about Elizabeth, effectively, isn't it? Like, you know what I mean? But even that is sort of like so... You're never quite sure, you're sort of like reading it on eggshells almost, because you think, something fucks up is going to happen here in a bit. And it does in the original version.
Yeah. I mean, even the rewritten version after you had a conversation with Andrea Dworkin, it's better, but it's still not great.
Yeah.
It's funny, years ago, my cousin Emily, I mean, she's in her late 20s now, but I was talking to her about Moorcock, and her boyfriend at the time was just getting into Moorcock, and there was a really nice new edition of Gloriana, and I bought her it and sent her it, knowing that it wouldn't have the original ending. And, she still raised her eyebrows at it, let's say, and said, yes, was what she said about reading Gloriana.
Yeah. It's interesting getting a take with fresh eyes from a different generational view as well, isn't it? Like,
Well, as a result, when I do Gloriana, I want to do it with Emily.
Yeah. No, that'd be good. That'd be good,
but anyway, there's a lot of my reread to come, so I've got a lot of Moorcock to reread. But at this stage, maybe we'll just settle by saying that kind of portrayal isn't one of his strengths.
No.
In 1966?
No, not then, no.
Yeah, but then again, moral and emotional turpitude is generally more interesting, isn't it? So
yeah, I mean, Elric wouldn't be Elric without all of the fucked up sexual, emotional rants he has with all of his femme fatales. Like, I mean, it's just like... It's got to be Doom, hasn't it? If it's not Doom, then you're not writing a goth album.
that second half of Weird of the White Wolf, the stories in there, where 2 stories in a row, there's a woman, and it's like, one of them like ends up staying in a cave and dying. He's like, bye then. And at the beginning of the first story, he sends a Moonglum. Oh, I loved her Moonglum. Oh, I'm miserable. I'm miserable in this tavern because I loved her so much. But at the time, he's like, bye then.
Yeah. I'm off now. Bye. Yeah. Me and the lads are going out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Fucking hell. Yeah, don't leave the Valium alone. Fuck off.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
But I mean, on Flawed Character, the malaise is spreading because now we've got Andros. who,
Yes.
when he called them up on the vidi screen or the laser screen or whatever it was and saw that Clovis was in bed with Fastina, he feels spurned. He's now taken to wearing black and referring to my men and leading a vigilante force determined to take on the Brotherhood of Guilt. So we've got an interesting scenario where we've got one lot of skinheads who wear brown, and we've got the alternative lot who wear black, and they're all having street fights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think on that.
There's another very telling and astute observation, too, about how circumstances compromise character when they visit Kalax at his under-construction Titan mission. And this is like, oh, Kalax, really? You're going to disappoint me as well. It says, people have been really kind, Kalax said. I've had more than I need volunteering to help put the ship together. I'm going to call her the Orlando Charvis, after the man who commanded the colonising expedition. Though startled to hear the name, Marcus said calmly, Charvis wasn't a particularly heroic figure by all accounts. Didn't he do biological experiments on living human beings, things like that? Maybe he had to, Kalax said. Besides, it depends how you look at it. Sharvid had vision and guts. I don't care about the rest of his character, good or bad.
That really is like... I sort of agree with what this person's saying. So regardless of anything else, let's just vote for them.
Yes.
That's exactly it, isn't it? You know?
And you shriek at them, but he's obviously a cunt.
Yeah.
Listen to what he's saying. These people are telling you who they are. Oh, yeah, but he's a strong character and he'll get things done.
Yeah. It's like Jimmy Savile used to say, they haven't caught me yet. It's like, fucking hell.
We're of that age as well, where I'm sure at some point we've been in a pub and we've heard someone say, oh, Hitler had some quite good ideas, really. I bet you a tenner you've sat in a pub at some point in your life and some fucking idiot has said that.
Being a sort of like in my teens in the 70s and being sort of like, in the late 70s, being 18, 19, there was a lot of National Front stuff going on. And I vaguely knew these people who used to try and recruit me to go and join the National Front, and I'm like, fuck right off. I haven't got a problem with anyone, just fuck off. Yeah. And that was it. It's like, oh yeah, but you want to read like Mein Kampf, had some great ideas. And it's like fucking, do you understand what you're reading? Do you actually understand it beyond the fact that he's just appealing to the xenophobic lunacy that you think is great, the chest beating, knuckle dragging monsters that you actually think are great? These people, it's, you can't even say they were just sort of like totally testosterone driven, because a lot of them were sort of like fucking had office jobs and all this sort of shit. They weren't like, I'm not disparaging construction workers, but they weren't rough lads who worked on building sites generally. They were people who should have known better. They were people who should have actually had to think about it and actually gone, well, you know what, this is a bit of a cunt. I'm not gonna listen to this. But of course, you get swept along, don't you? Yeah. It actually sort of like says something to some deep down dark part of you. And once everyone else is telling, I mean, it's that old thing, isn't it? If you hear the same thing 3 times, then it's fact. Yeah. And it's like, fuck off. You see it all the time on social media, but you're right. I've had people sit there going, oh, it was great. It had some wonderful ideas. Oh yeah, you should have done this and you should. No. You should just go away and fucking have a good word with yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I did horrific things, but he had some good ideas and he got stuff done.
Yeah.
Like, fuck's sake, man.
You know what? I've heard that about a certain orange-faced bastard. Yeah. Well, at least he's doing what he says he's going to do. No. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it's I was on Instagram yesterday or today thinking, you know what, Meta can fuck off as well. Should I shut down Instagram now as well? And I'll let it go. And then when you go to the search field on Instagram, when you press search, every time I go on there now, half of it's AI images, and the other half is just a variety of nonsense. Very little of it is actually relevant to me. So I thought, right, I'll figure out how to go into your settings on Instagram and reset the algorithm. So I reset the algorithm, and a few things came in that were about things like, maybe metal or stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, I would say, as you're scrolling down, when you press search and all the little stories come up and the reels come up, I would say 1 in 10 was either Putin as like a gangster in a leather coat with a giant bulldog, AI, or it was an AI video of Trump as a UFC fighter rippling with muscles. So this is what happens now if you reset your algorithm on Instagram. is 1 in 10 of the things that you're going to get recommended is people sitting, masturbating about Musk, Putin, or Trump and creating AI images to aid their own masturbation. It's like, you know what? It's time to go, Instagram.
Yeah, what these people don't realise as well is one day they're going to blend AI and quantum computing together and make these massive fuck-off computers. Then you've got Skynet, and Skynet's going to look at all these AI images that people have created and gone, you're a fucking virus. Yeah. And then you've got Terminator, you've got World Over. You know?
Yeah. Well, if we think it's bad here, society on this Earth, non-rotating Earth, is getting bad as well. Of their old council muckers, some have joined the Brotherhood of Guilt. Others have voted emergency powers in for Andros and his boot boys. It's all going to shit, Andy.
It is. The party's over.
Yeah, it really is. The Shores of Death is split into 3, and this is the end of Book 1, as was Moorcock's style at the time. Book 2 kicks off with some striking imagery as Clovis Marker gets some quick lessons on apathy and inaction. Volusis tried to convince him to take on the chairmanship and use his position of most respected character around to mediate between the opposing forces, but he withdraws, spends loads of time at Fastina's place, just fucking or ruminating on the possibility of fucking again or running away. He's there for days and days and days after Volusi has begged him to go back and be the mediator between these two forces. And he gets a call from Volusi. He scoots over there, but Volusi has been beaten by Brotherhood goons. They've tried to burn his house down and they're now in open warfare with the Black Cloaks, the leader of whom isn't shy about showing open scorn for Marker protesting about violence meeting violence isn't the answer. And things only get worse at the council meeting that follows. And then this will be our last big reading, I think.
Okay.
Because we've been at it an hour and 20 minutes and we're only halfway through the book. So we might have to speed things up a little bit.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah. As the meeting began, Marker realised that it was all but useless. The proportion of black cloak vigilantes and brown-habited cult members in the auditorium was slightly higher than the proportion of ordinary men and women. He had not realised how quickly groups of that sort could grow. Hovering above in their black air cars were several more of Alma's vigilantes, Alma being Andros. We've been calling him Andros all the way through, but listeners, Alma equals Andros Alma. Alma himself sat on the platform with Navo, Volusi and Marker. He leaned back casually with his arms folded and his legs crossed, the very picture of arrogance. His hood was flung back, but he wore his mask still. Looking around the auditorium, Marker saw that the fashion for wearing masks, albeit brightly coloured ones, has also increased. There were scarcely 20 people there who did not wear a mask of some kind. Volusi had recovered. His hands were still bruised and his shoulders were not held as straight as normal, but he gave the appearance of being relaxed. He stood up to open the meeting.
As you have heard, he began, Clovis Marker has agreed to head a new administration which will be specifically concerned with dealing with the various problems that have arisen since the old council disbanded. The new administration, Volusi continued, will attempt to ensure that people will have security and perhaps a sense of purpose.
He went on in this vein for some time, but Marker could tell that Volusi's diplomatic words were making no impression at all. The Brotherhood of Guilt was fanatical and convinced of their own right to act as they saw fit. The vigilantes evidently despised the kind of argument Volusi was using. As for the ordinary people, they could look around them and see how useless it was to try and reconcile the opposed groups by means of placatory words.
And so we require volunteers, Volusi concluded. Preferably people who have served on a council of some kind in the past. Would those willing raise their hands?
All the Brotherhood members raised their hands. Most of the vigilantes raised their hands. 2 ordinary people raised their hands, glanced about, then lowered them again. Marker realised that a mockery was being made of the whole anarchic democratic system they had lived by for so long. The idea of forming a new administration on a sane and rational basis had been doomed from the start. It was now plain. Perhaps he had instinctively realised this and for that reason had been slow to act. Volusi was evidently at a loss.
Perhaps if you could remove your masks, he began.
Marker got up. He thought he heard Alma chuckle from where he sat, still in the same casual posture. We want a balanced representation, said Marker as levelly as he could. Could we have a few more volunteers from the, he pretended to smile, non-aligned men and women here? No more hands were raised. Suddenly there was a scream from above them. Everyone looked into the air. A black-cloaked man was falling towards the ground. He landed with a smack just short of the platform. Marker rushed towards him, but he could tell from the way the body lay that he was dead. He began to peel off the mask to see who it was. The man seemed to have fallen from his air car, yet he was wearing a grav strap. It had not been switched on. He heard a shout. People were still looking upwards. There, drifting away from the air car on a grav strap, was a brown-habited member of the Brotherhood. It was evident that he had come up behind the vigilante and pushed him out of his car before he could operate his grav strap. Vigilantes were now rising into the air to give chase. Others were grappling with Brotherhood members in the tiers of the auditorium. Marcus still had his hand on the dead man's mask, and now he felt someone touch his shoulder. He looked up into the shadowed face of Andros Alma. "Don't remove his mask," Alma said icily. "Didn't you know that was one of the reasons for wearing them? So we shall not know who are dead and who are living?" Marcus straightened and looked straight at Alma. "This is superstition, Andros." "Is it? We think it is practical." There was a triumphant bantering note in Alma's voice now. "We are a practical group of men. It was a worthy decision to make, Clovis, about forming a government, but as you can see, it's unnecessary. I suggest you and Narvo go home and stay out of all of this. We can look after things perfectly well." Marco looked to where a great mass of men were fighting. The whole auditorium was in confusion. In the air, 2 cars crashed head-on with a great splintering sound. Men dropped out of them and began fighting in mid-air. "As you can see, there's too much violence for a man like yourself to cope with, Clovis," Alma said patronisingly with soft amusement. "There's a new order now, one well equipped to deal with this sort of thing. I would rather see you safely away from the unpleasantness." Marco felt the anger coming back with renewed strength. He wanted to strike Alma. "You helped produce this situation, Andros. You're doing nothing to get rid of it. Look what happened earlier. Your men killed a Brotherhood member. Now a Brotherhood member kills one of your men. You can only make things worse." "We shall see." Blimey, it's all going horribly, horribly wrong. It's all gone proper Pete Tong, Andy.
It has.
And Clovis Marker, too fucking late, mate. Too late. And even at this point, Marker and his old friend, Valusi, Narvas Valusi, fucking names. Facina decide they're accepting they've lost control is the wise course, and they piss off to the beach, thinking maybe if we go to the beach, they'll just leave us alone.
It'd be great. Let's go to Ibiza. Yay.
Oh, good Lord. And then a month later, Valusi puts the laser screen on, and things have got even worse in ways they, having been born to a utopian society, couldn't possibly have dreamed of. Because what they see on the telly, the Glade is now surrounded by a force wall, and Andros and co are executing Brotherhood members on public telly. And, says he was not called Alma now by his men, but simply Leader. "I judge you guilty of the complicity in the murder of another citizen," Alma was saying, "and sentence you to die so that your fellows will learn by your example." "No," Marcus said incredulously at his friends. "Has it reached this stage already?" "Oh, it's like, fucking hell, catch up, Clovis Marker. Yeah. Because, you know what, it's been coming. You've had all the signs. And now, there it is. How are they going to claw this back, Andy?"
Well, I'm not sure it's even possible. Even with a massive amount of ease, they couldn't make everyone happy on this one, could they?
Yeah, well, spoiler, they don't. There is no epic, heroic turning round of society on the part of Valusi and Clovis Marker and Fastina. And you know what? The first half of this book was very specifically one thing, right? An interesting study of how a society built upon socialist platform, when introduced to unforeseen circumstances and fear, can very, very quickly turn into something completely different.
Yeah. You go full circle, can't it?
Yeah. The second half of this book, on the other hand, something slightly different. Before we get into that, I curated my beers because I knew that this was a book of two halves. So for the first half, which I thought was interesting, complex, quite fruity, a little bit of sourness. For the second half, this is more classic Moorcock, apt, fairly familiar, unspectacular, little bit transitional, but stuff I think we have largely seen before from Moorcock, or, in terms of narrative order, stuff we will see a lot more of. So, my second half beer is Tetley.
Oh, classic. A classic.
I'm having some Tetley. The first half, it leaned more towards a grim political breakdown, like a more heightened version of some of the stuff in the Black Corridor, but in a more fantastical Dying Earth kind of setting. How would you describe the second half?
The second half is a bit more psychedelic romp almost it turns almost into like a space epic, because obviously going into the night side of Earth, it changes the feel of it somewhat, and you've got heading towards this climax, but in a sort of like a mashed up sort of scientific way, rather than being we go from the political nonsense into a more coldly clinical scientific, this is what could happen, and if this is what you want to happen, this is what will happen sort of way.
The second half for me feels more like a proto version of some of the things to come. There are features of it like the Hawkmoon series, like you've got the weird science, the ancient technology. Yeah. You've got an extended confrontation now where Clovis Marker goes back to try and reason with Andros, where he basically is a mustache-twirling villain. Comes across a little bit like Baron Meliadus. They even have a sword fight.
Yeah.
At one point. There is a nice bit where, after retreating to his father's tower, they're taken and effectively imprisoned in his father's old tower by Mr. Take. And these towers, as we found out earlier on, predate the last war. So whilst the world of the last 400 years has forgotten how to make things like guns, this tower has all sorts of weird science weaponry and defences. It's described as being weirdly flesh-like in terms of its architecture. It's like one of, it's like a cross between a tower from Gran Breton and one of the Camargue's defence towers. Yes. It's quite interesting, but there's a nice bit where after they've been at this tower, one of Andros's scouts finds him after 2 years. They're there for 2 years, and they're constantly getting restocked by Mr. Take every few months, but they can never get Mr. Take to take them away, and they're basically stranded there. So Clovis has this plan to try and trap Mr. Take, but long story short, one of Andros' scouts finds them. We get some more exposition, and you get a quite nice, interesting bit, because Marker hears that Andros has complete control of the population now. The Brotherhood of Guilt are effectively wiped out, but also is using the idea of association with the Brotherhood of Guilt to eliminate all opposition, all dissent, as these people do. And as often happens, elements within Andros's upper echelons and his officers are plotting against him in the name of Clovis Marker. So he wants Marker to go back and denounce them all and be Andros's friend and forgive him everything he's done and become part of the establishment, so to speak, to put down these potential uprisings or any attempts to assassinate him. And otherwise, he'll take him back and give him a show trial. So it's basically turned him into an Emmanuel Goldstein kind of character.
Yeah.
Andros's big brother, he's positioning Marker as Emmanuel Goldstein. And that's quite interesting in terms of a scenario. But again, it's just an idea that's there and then it's gone. And we move on to something else. He kills this scout. It's quite brutal, the way he kills this scout. Quite unpleasant. But he ends up with a vehicle so he can tail Mr. Take, and he finds a town of survivors of Orlando Charvis's attentions, or recipients of the granting of Orlando Charvis's wishes. Every single one of them a massive red flag.
Yeah. Can I just say about the tower bit? When he leaves Fastina, doesn't tell her he's going.
No.
He just gets in the fucking spaceship thing and fucks off.
Yeah.
And he leaves her there on her own, not knowing what's gone on, with a dead body mashed up in a couch.
That's right, he does, yeah. Yeah, it's like, she'll tidy that up.
Yeah.
She'll clean up. Oh, God. But everything there is one massive red flag. You've got all these people. He finds Elodius, the artist who wanted immortality, and is essentially frozen in position. The only thing that's animated is his eyes, and they are just horrified.
Yeah, just
because
screaming.
He's immortal, but he's trapped inside of his static body. It's terrifying, and you've got lots and lots of other stuff like that. But it's all entirely wasted on Marker, because he finally meets Orlando Charvis on the moon after Mr. Take, in order to stop him from continuing to find Orlando Charvis, bashes his head in with a rock.
Yeah.
But Orlando Charvis takes him to the moon and saves his life. And the conclusion of all this is basically a big monkey's paw by way of sort of Faustian bargain kind of scenario, where despite all of these red flags, despite all of these signs, despite Mr. Take bashing his head in with a rock and saying, he's suckering you in, he's going to seem reasonable to you, and you're going to buy it, and he's going to do what you want him to do, and it's going to be shit, and You're not going to like it. You're going to regret it. He's just like, yeah, whatever, Mr. Take. Yeah, whatever. I'm not seeing any of these signs, and I don't believe you. I think you might be biased. He accuses Mr. Take, a guy who we find out was experimented on by Jarvis before the last war, is functionally immortal, but lives a horrific existence, might be biased.
Yeah. You don't know what you're talking about, mate.
It's absolutely amazing. So Clovis Marker was warned repeatedly right up to the end, but either his psychological makeup won't allow him to see it, or he's just a massive Burke. And then everything rambles to a conclusion where Andros doesn't die, Clovis Marker doesn't die. He gets his head bashed in with a rock, but he gets brought back to life. Fastina gets brought to the moon by Andros. So we have this final like face-off between Clovis Marker, Andros, Fastina, Mr. Take, and Orlando Jarvis. And Mr. Take's only wish is to be allowed to die. So Orlando Jarvis creates this scenario where he says, okay, Clovis Marker, I will make you functionally immortal. I'll make Fastina functionally immortal because you've asked me to. But Mr. Take will have to give up some of his physical makeup, and that will cost him his life. So Clovis says, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
He's like, fuck that guy. He's biased. Make me immortal. You're like, what?
Yeah.
You absolute dickhead.
and all this time takes just tutting at him.
He's an absolute prick.
Oh, man. I know I was reading that thinking, wow, how much writing does there have to be on the wall before you fucking well understand what's happening?
Yeah, it's incredible. And Andros gets his wish, which is he wants Jarvis to rotate the Earth again.
Yes.
So Jarvis is like, oh, well, yeah, I've got this machine. And he takes him in a room, and it sounds like just like a big pile of junk with a yellow tarpaulin on it and some wires sticking out of it. He's like, oh, well, yeah, I've been thinking about this. I actually put this together years ago. It might work. And Andros is like, let's do it. So it works for a while, and then the machine melts down, and all it does is turn the world 180 degrees. So the day side is now the night side. So all of Andros's kingdom, so to speak, is now the Nightland. And he's like, oh, damn you, Orlando Jarvis. This is not what I wanted. And Orlando Jarvis is just like, eh.
That's what you asked for. You didn't say how much.
It's like, yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. You know what? Every fucking sign they had. And unfortunately for Clovis Marker, he is now immortal, but he can feel nothing.
Pretty much like Take, isn't it?
Yeah. He's immortal, but he can't feel anything. All he will ever experience is mental stimulation, no physical stimulation whatsoever. Whereas Fastina is now immortal, not because her life has been extended, but because her womb has been restored, so she can live on through her children.
Yes.
So Clovis can knock her up, but he can't take any pleasure from it. He can't feel any of it, and he's effectively might as well be an android for all that it helps anything. But the brilliant thing is, Fastina is really happy.
I
know. And she deserves it. You know what? She's the only one who deserves to be happy, and she finishes happy.
Yeah, she does. But there's this horrible sort of thing where you think, basically, Clovis has become his father.
Yeah.
Because now, when Fastina dies, whatever children she has, in order to keep the race going, he's probably going to end up breeding with them. Or brothers and sisters are going to do it. So you've still got this, this incestuous thing going on. It's just continuing, isn't it?
Yeah, because they all basically go back to the tower in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Because the Twilight Zone has shifted to the other pole.
Yes.
So the Nightland is now on the opposite side, but they go back to the tower where he will give her children. And the whole cycle will continue. But on this occasion, unlike his father, he's immortal.
Yes. Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
Orlando Jarvis, to me, is he's a bit like Willy Wonka, isn't he?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you can eat as much as you want, but I'm warning you. But no, I want to eat all that chocolate. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an interesting take, that, because in the Winds of Limbo, the Fire Clown was like Moorcock's Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Wasn't he?
Yeah.
Whereas in this, Orlando Jarvis is Moorcock's Willy Wonka. Yeah. I never thought of it that way. Oh, so what do you reckon, Andy? What are your thoughts on The Shores of Death?
Well, like you said about the first half, it's very much a sort of like a political polemic, isn't it? It reminded me in some respects of reading, strangely, of reading Hannah Ardent's on totalitarianism, which is like, a book about how totalitarian regimes form and what happens when they do. And it's a great book. But reading this, I was thinking, fucking hell, this is the playbook, basically. Of exactly what happens. You think society's great, you think everything's going along nicely, and then some dickhead comes along and ruins the party by going, you know what, we could make this better if I fucking kill all you lot and take over, because it'll be great then. It'll be like forever. And then, Clovis is basically such an emotional wreck. Yeah. He's a child, isn't he? And he's actually really narcissistic, because his whole idea about living forever, you seem to get the impression that he's always wanted this. Right from the very start, that's the thing he wants to do, is to live forever and fuck everyone else. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And I guess he gets what's coming to him in the end, but we still don't find out what happens to Orlando Jarvis. He's just tootling around, isn't he? He don't care. He's this giant with a snake's head. Fucking people up.
At the end, Orlando Jarvis is just like, well.
Yeah, it's great.
See you later, everyone.
Yeah. Why isn't there another book about him?
I'll drop you off at home and see you later.
Yeah, bye. Man. It's bonkers.
It's amazing.
It's a good story, though. And I'm glad I reread it, because, I had difficulties with it when I first read it, but rereading it, there's a lot of stuff in there. And like you say, amongst, in today's political climate and the way the world is, you can sort of see the way people's narcissism, especially on social media, drives them to do things which are really the antithesis of their own well-being. But they do it anyway because they want the glory. They want to live forever vicariously through other people going, "Oh, you're great," like, you know what I mean? And it's there's a lot of that going on in this.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a transitional book where he's moving on from his like mid-60s scientific SF experimentation books.
Yeah.
And moving very much towards his own kind of thing. And there are definitely lots of things in here that will crop up again repeatedly with a less tart and cynical application, I think.
Yeah.
I wish I'd saved myself another super tart ghost or something for the end, because that really is a fucking tart ending. It's, but it is transitional, and it's very, very darkly intentioned as well. I think in terms of how it starts and how it comes full circle at the end. But yeah, definitely well worth a look. If you are listening and you tend to some degree dismiss his 60s SF output, which isn't part of the Eternal Champion cycle, these books, Winds of Limbo, this, Sundered World Struck, Blood Red Game, we'll get to at some point, because I haven't read them for a long, long, long time. Rituals of Infinity, I would say, you can take it or leave it. It's, even rereading that, it was okay. It was pretty lightweight. But this and Winds of Limbo and The Black Corridor, they've got bite. They've got a real bite. Yeah. Well, check it out.
They've got those lovely vignettes in as well, which make, you can see how other things have grown from them, and they're lovely. Yeah.
Well, you know what, Andy? Thanks for taking the time to come and check out The Shores of Death.
Pleasure, mate.
And at some point in the next couple of months, we'll have a conversation about what's next. Well, we know what it is. It's the Texter Festival, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
We'll do that in a few months. All right, mate. Thanks again, and I'll catch you on the flip side.
Nice one.
Many thanks to Andy Darby for once again coming by Derry and Tom's to talk books and tell us what he's up to. You can find his last novel, The Blade in the Angel's Shadow, and the 2 volumes so far of The Chronicles of the Monkey God in the usual book places, and all 13 parts, 13 at the time of the release of this podcast at least, on his Substack. Just search Andy Darby Sword Songs, and I'll link to the page in the show notes too. We've had a few communications recently, which I always enjoy. First up, another Andy, Andy Jacobson, dropped me a line to say, as they say, long-time listener and first-time caller from Minneapolis. Picked up The Dream Thief's Daughter and came upon a passage today that blew my mind given our current political climate. I believe that every so often the monster goes out of control and is left to certain of us who call ourselves by various names to fight that monster and to show that it can be wounded if not destroyed. Not all of us use guns or swords, we'll use words or the ballot box, but sometimes the result is the same, for it is motive in the end that the public must examine in its leaders, and, given time, that is exactly what a mature democracy does. But when it is frightened and bullied into bigotry, it no longer behaves like a mature democracy. Moorcock published this novel in 2001. Thought that would resonate with you. Thanks for all the great content. 2001, Andy. That was 25 years after Mike wrote The Shores of Death, and here we are now, close to another 25 years later, and it's all still punching us in the face, isn't it? Remarkable. We also had a comment on our woodlice episode from Chris Neely. Chris said, "Okay, I worked as a psychiatric technician at LMHI, Lakeshore Mental Health Institute, aged 23, in 1994-95. It was located on a 78-acre wrought iron gated campus through which the Tennessee River flows, joined by a small brook. A 2 acres lake forms at the delta of said brook confluence with the mighty Tennessee. Each spring the lake would flood out into the river with an undertow, right into the waiting jaws of ancient river catfish. Giant behemoths the size of a dinghy. Carnivore 3, channel cats." Now, that is a great setup for a one-shit book, throwing angles about effluent runoff from a cannabis farm operated by an adult former biochemistry dropout hippie and some American take on dogging, and boom, write it, Chris, write it. Also, Alistair Davison had some thoughts on our Luther Arkwright episode. He said, "Loved the Brian Talbot episode. I've met him a couple of times at conventions and he's so good to talk to. Nemesis was my introduction to him, but I missed out on all the Luther Arkwright stuff. Alice in Sunderland is one of my favourite graphic novels ever. I've lived near the town all my life, and I'm sure I learned more about it in Brian's book than anywhere else. It's a place that's had its ups and downs over the years, but hopefully the redevelopment work going on will bring back some cheer. Listening to Tom talk about being unable to get comics he saw advertised was extremely relatable, and took me right back to having to get the bus to Newcastle and visit the fabled Time Slip for a non-DC Marvel fix. Ah, the memories." Thanks, Alistair, for taking the time to let us know. I'm hoping to talk to Brian about Alice in Sunderland next time around, so look out for that one. After our woodlice episode, we had a few people drop us a line too to remind us who Lionel Fanthorpe was, and Lee Mason said, "Fair enough, you've sold it to me. Book ordered." You likely do remember Lionel Fanthorpe from TV. He was the presenter of 4TN TV on Channel 4 and has presented numerous other paranormal documentaries for British and American TV. He's still alive as far as I know, so maybe a possible future guest. Well, he still is alive and kicking, so who knows? One for the list, perhaps. And Brian Rhodes commented on the Time of the Hawk Lords episode, saying, "I'm a Hawkwind fan of a long standing. I live and have lived in Australia all my life, but I have a strong connection to the music and mythology of Great Britain. In '76, I came across a copy of Time of the Hawk Lords and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had always heard of the second, but had never found a copy until recently, about 5 years ago. Yet to read it, but I have it on my to-be-read pile." You and me both, Brian. Not enough hours in the bloody day, is there? And finally for now, 23 Sons 2445 commented on our Moorcock and RPGs Part 2 Storm Hack episode with Ralph Lovegrove from 4 or 5 years ago. He said, "Great interview, more Stormbringer RPG material! Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark." Well, thank you, 23 Sons. I'm not sure we can rinse anything else out of the Stormbringer RPG, but I do have the 2 different Mongoose takes on the Elric game, the quick starter of the newly translated Mornblade RPG from Led Apartmore, 2 different Hawkmoon RPGs, the Dark Side Quorum supplement, not to mention the freely distributed unofficial games based upon the Elric stories like Lobo Blanco by Patricio Gonzalez, Dances in the Dreaming City, a one-page RPG in pamphlet form by Micah Anderson, and Dictionary of Elric by John S. Wilson, itself a supplement for Ron Edwards' Sorcerer RPG, inspired by the increasingly hard-to-find Dictionary of Mew by Judd Kalman. I think it was John who flagged this to me a few years ago on the old utopian version of Twitter. So, plenty more to look at in the gaming sphere. If anybody else is hungry for more on that front, drop us a line and let me know. But in the meantime, it's just time to thank our patrons. First, those without tier. Anthony Piconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster and Sebastian Weetabix, And our Chaos engineers, Ed Von Stout, Andrew Cicluna, Andrew Spong, Andrew Van Ness, Anthony Porter, Benjamin Fletcher, Ben Hagar, Brandon Mayers, Dan Charnley, Dave Griffiths, Dave Voxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner Aston, Jim Kirkland, Jim Jupp, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Matt Saltz, Michael Hopwood, Nick Hopkinson, Ofer Ziv, Paul McRandall, PJ Cooper, Scott Butler, and Simon Perrins. And of course our crafty Jugaderos, Adrian Tchaikovsky, Brian Henderson, Chris Sharp, Christian Hundal, Graham Holden, Kevin Williams, Liam Toner, Loz, Mark Buckley, Mark Taylor, Matthew Broom, Murray Palmer, Sean Twist, Toby White, and Taylor Lavery. An eternal thanks to our patron demons, Action Edmonds, Alistair Davison, Andrew Clark, Andy Darby, David Lee, Derek Clunan, Fred Quiche, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Jenny Stim, Jason Vogel, Joachim Sund, Joe Monty, Johan Hjarper, Jonathan Sharp, Lee Gary, Marius Latauskas, Mark Hebden, Miles Reed-Labato, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, Tony Milazzo, the OG patron Norman Beresford, and last but never least, Robert McMillan. Okay, enough from me. Don't forget you can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky with the handle @BreakfastRuins. You can email us at breakfastruins@outlook.com. The webpage is breakfastintheruins.com. BITR Breakfast in the Ruins Radio is live on Radio Garden or via the web player at breakfastintheruinsradio.blogspot.com. We have our Patreon page too, of course, and there are a few extra odds and sods on there. But until next time, take care, stay safe, and we will meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.